On this edition of It's a Miracle, take a terrifying journey inside a violent tornado.
And I thought, man, you got to get out of here.
And follow the amazing series of events that lead to a miracle. Then, a common childhood illness turns deadly.
His neck was being held at a very unusual, difficult position, twisting so much the doctors were very concerned that it would actually snap his spinal cord.
When every available medical procedure fails to save his life, a desperate mother finds another cure. A family's vacation to the Grand Canyon turns into a day of terror until a mysterious force comes to the rescue. Plus, for the son of legendary baseball hero Roberto Clemente, tragedy follows him everywhere. Starting with his father's death in a mysterious plane crash to the senseless murder of his girlfriend's father, the story of what happens after she's placed into the witness protection program is one that will make you believe in miracles. And a frightening dream becomes a real-life nightmare. The story of one woman's narrow escape from death. It started as a run in the park, but ended as a race against time.
I heard like a cat noise, like a meow noise.
The shocking discovery of a baby buried alive. See all these incredible stories and more on It's a Miracle.
Oh, it's a miracle, happening to everyday people, changing their lives forever. It's a miracle.
Welcome to It's a Miracle. I'm Richard Thomas.
And I'm Nia Peoples. Miracles are defined as incredible events that defy logical explanation. And that precisely describes the kinds of stories we'll be sharing with you tonight.
Whether you believe in miracles or not, these stories will certainly make you wonder.
And you'll hear them firsthand from the real people who experience them. People who are convinced that sometimes the world can work in miraculous ways.
Every year, the Grand Canyon attracts millions of tourists to experience its awesome beauty. But in 1977, one of those tourists experienced a moment of terror so intense that even today, it still haunts her. 21 years ago, Al Halliday of Heartland, Michigan, took his family on a vacation to Grand Canyon National Park. He brought along his 14-year-old sister, Janie.
We stopped off at a lookout point, and we were just all kind of roaming around, sort of on our own.
In spite of warnings posted along the rim, Janie was determined to get a good photograph of the canyon floor. A dangerous shot that could only be taken beyond the guardrail. As soon as she stepped past the barrier, her nightmare began.
I had taken a few photographs just looking out, but I wanted one looking down to show the depth of this canyon. All of a sudden, my feet just came out from under me.
Whoa!
Janie hurtled down the steep cliff towards certain death, when suddenly her body came to a mysterious, abrupt stop.
I just thought, this is strange. You know, what stopped me? There wasn't anything that I did.
Ow! Help me!
Above her, on the overlook, Janie's family was in a state of shock. They couldn't hear her cries for help and could only imagine that she had fallen thousands of feet.
My wife was screaming, my sister-in-law was screaming. As I was leaning out, looking over, I couldn't see her, I couldn't even see the bottom.
Janie!
You know, it's one of those moments of sheer panic. You know, what do you do? Where did she go?
Help! Please, somebody help me!
Janie tried to work her way up the steep embankment, but with each movement, she risked losing her footing and plunging down the side of the cliff.
I can remember looking up at the top, but it was so steep you could not see the top. And I just sat there for a few minutes and just thought, you know, how am I supposed to get back up?
Desperate and frightened, Janie continued to push herself up the steep cliff. But she was in an impossible situation. There was no way that she could do this on her own. Janie has no idea how it happened. But one moment she was hopelessly trapped on the side of the canyon. And the next, she found herself back at the top.
I don't remember actually moving up, but I remember I knew something strange had happened. My family, as soon as they saw me, they all just came running, and they were crying, and I was crying, and we just hugged.
When Janie returned home, she shared her terrifying experience with her mother, Shirley. And that's when she discovered a possible explanation for what had happened. At the exact moment she was hanging for her life from the side of the cliff, her mother, over 1,500 miles away, experienced a powerful premonition.
I knew that Janie was going to die. I couldn't stop sobbing.
As quickly as her feeling of panic had arrived, it suddenly left.
I stopped crying. A peace just came over me, and I couldn't imagine why I had this premonition. I didn't even know where they were.
Years later, Shirley traveled to the exact spot where her daughter had nearly died.
And I walked the trails and went out to the lookout points. Anyone that ever goes over that edge, there is no way they can ever get back to the top without some miracle.
From that time on, I felt safe always. You know, that I did have a guardian angel that was watching over me.
Here, we'll all put our hands on the baby.
Today, as Janie prepares to be a mother for the first time, she has no doubt that surviving a fall into the Grand Canyon was nothing short of a miracle.
My guardian angel was the person that stopped me on that side of the cliff and brought me back up to the top safely. Faith just gets you through every day and every trial and tribulation.
Oh, it's a miracle, a miracle.
At this time of year, angels seem to turn up everywhere. They're constant reminders of the miracles of this holiday season. But angels can appear whenever and wherever they're needed, and our next story proves it. It takes place during one of the Earth's most deadly forces of nature, a tornado.
When a violent tornado struck Nashville, Tennessee without warning on May 18, 1995, it set in motion a series of incredible events that would change the lives of two complete strangers.
Be happy to. I'll get back with you. Okay.
It was just after noon on a Thursday. Jan Nevy was working her shift as office manager at Haverty's furniture store when she looked out to see the sky turning an eerie shade of green.
And I thought, wow, I have never seen anything like this before. I stood there for a moment, and the lights went out.
A scream brought Jan running to the lunchroom door. She opened it to calm down whoever was inside.
Lights just went out. We'll get some power.
But just then, the twister touched down. The heavy door slammed shut on Jan's hand, crushing it, trapping her in place, and exposing her to the full force of the tornado.
The entire building literally exploded around me.
Nearby, windows suddenly imploded.
Glass was going everywhere. They were huge pieces of glass. The air conditioning units were falling through. Tons of furniture was breaking and crashing, and I said, I'm not going to survive this.
The building was being ripped from its foundation, showering her with debris. But for Jan, there was no escape.
I tried to pull that door, and I pulled, and I pulled, and I was just stuck there. And I finally said, God, please help me.
And then, Just as suddenly as this violent storm had appeared, it was gone.
The sky turned blue, the storm had passed over, and I was able to finally pull that door back out off of my hand. But there was not a lot left of my hand at that point.
Jan was bleeding profusely, and she knew that if she didn't get help, she could die. But the phones were dead. The store and the entire neighborhood around it had been reduced to rubble. And outside, there wasn't a car or person in sight who could take her to a hospital.
I could get no help, and no help could get to me. So I thought, I'll just go sit on the curb, and I'm going to bleed to death right here. This is the day that I'm going to die.
Jan was completely alone. Only a miracle could save her now. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a pickup truck appeared. The driver, Robert Morgan, had absolutely no intention of being in Nashville that day. But something mysterious had forced him to change course, guiding him on a path that led directly to the furniture store.
I looked around and all I seen was, down poles, power lines over all these cars, and I thought, man, you got to get out of here. And then all of a sudden, I looked around to my right, and there comes Jan up to the door.
Can you take me to the hospital? Yes, ma'am.
Robert was eager to help, but he wasn't from the Nashville area, and he had no idea where the nearest hospital was located.
Thank you.
Jan, still suffering from shock, was forced to become the navigator.
And Jan was saying, please hurry. And I said, for some reason, I just said, no, it's time to stop.
As he slammed on the brakes, a damaged live power line fell directly in front of them. A moment later, and they could have been electrocuted. Amazingly, there was still enough room for Robert and Jan to slip under the wire. But Robert and Jan's day of terror wasn't over yet.
Oh, hurry, please. I'm bleeding so much.
Jan's loss of blood had reached a critical stage. Robert struggled to remove his belt for her to use as a tourniquet as he sped through the tornado wreckage.
Jan was bleeding real bad, and all I could think of was she's going to pass out on me, and then where will I be? Because I didn't know where I was going.
In desperation, Robert used his cell phone to get directions.
I've got a wounded woman.
But those directions led him straight back into the path of the tornado.
It was just tearing up everything in its path. I could still feel the wind shaking the truck. I mean, it just felt like it was going to flip over just any time.
Suddenly, a section of roof filled with nails flew into the path of the truck. Robert braced himself for a blowout. But miraculously, the tires weren't damaged.
The truck just seemed to be protected, just like a big bowl or something was over the top of it, just moving along with us.
When they finally arrived at the hospital, Jan was rushed into surgery. Fearing the loss of her hand, she would encounter one last astonishing incident of good fortune.
One of the nurses patted me on the shoulder and she said, this is your lucky day.
How's she doing?
She said, normally we don't have an orthopedic surgeon in surgery on a Thursday.
Very nice.
The surgeon was able to save Jan's hand that afternoon. And today, she has almost completely recovered. Both she and Robert are still amazed by the mysterious forces that brought them together that day.
There's so many things happened that day that it's hard for me to comprehend. I mean, I know that we were surrounded by a force that was greater than any that I knew, and it just protected us through all this.
My life was spared due to a number of miracles that took place. There is no logical reason for my survival.
But there may be another explanation. Jan believes that Robert was sent to her as a guardian angel.
I would not be here today if it had not been
for him.
If you ask people that know me and know me real good, they'll tell you I'm no angel. But I believe that mine and her guardian angels were both there.
Stay with us for more incredible stories when It's a Miracle returns.
Coming up on It's a Miracle. An afternoon in the park turns into a desperate search for help
Please call 911.
as a woman stumbles upon a mystery and a miracle. And later, can our dreams predict the future? And can we change our own destiny? The answers to these questions and more when It's a Miracle continues.
For me, the holidays are always much more fun when there are children around. It's the look on their faces when they see the presents under the tree, or when you tell them the story of Santa and his reindeer. They're always so full of wide-eyed wonder. Perhaps it's because they're able to see things that we as adults often overlook. The little boy in our next story has that ability, and now it's our turn to watch in wide-eyed wonder.
In 1988, Jeffrey and Cheryl Hare had their first child, a boy. They named him Ryan in honor of another very special young man.
I had had an adopted type brother named Ryan also, and he had died of cancer when he was 18. So that name was a very special name to us, so we didn't even consider another name for him.
For 5 years, Ryan grew and developed like any normal child. And then in March 1994, he came down with the chickenpox. At first, his mother wasn't overly concerned about this common childhood illness, but then suddenly she realized that something was terribly wrong. Ryan's fever had soared to 106, and the red spots on his neck had begun to swell. He was immediately rushed to a local hospital and put under the care of Dr. Diane Foley. Ryan was critically ill.
There was infection underneath the skin of his whole body. It actually spread all the way around his neck. And at that point, when there's swelling, what you worry about in your neck is that it will affect your airway, and you won't be able to breathe.
The physicians told us that they were doing everything they could. They put him on all of the drugs. They told us that we should see some response within 24 to 48 hours.
But 2 days later, Ryan was getting worse, not better.
The infection was spreading to all parts of his body, but in addition, his neck was being held at a very unusual, difficult position, twisting so much the doctors were very concerned that it would actually snap his spinal cord.
After almost 2 weeks of trying everything to save Ryan's life, the doctors told his parents there was nothing more they could do.
Our whole mission in life is to heal, and it's very difficult to be in a situation where you have to admit you can't do that.
When the doctors came and told us that there wasn't any more that they could do, it was kind of a helpless feeling, kind of a, wow, we're in this alone.
I was very scared when they told us nothing more could be done. I really believed that Ryan might die. That was probably the first time it really sunk in.
But Cheryl refused to give up hope.
I turned away from all the medical things that I knew and turned straight to my faith.
She read a story about how angels are always nearby, ready to guard us in our times of need. And then she quietly asked them to come to the rescue of her dying son.
Please, Lord, we need you to help us. And I asked specifically, I'm not sure why, except that there were 4 empty corners in the room for 4 angels just to sit up in the corners and to watch over my son.
The next day, while his father Jeffrey kept vigil by his son's side, Ryan's condition dramatically improved.
It kind of stunned me. I was surprised that he was even moving, and to see him up on his hands and knees and appearing as though he wasn't in any pain, it shocked me. I couldn't believe that it could be such a night and day situation where he felt so much better.
12 days later, the boy who doctors had said might die was going home, And that's when he told his mother his own amazing story about the angels who had visited him in his room.
They kind of just standed there covering the corners that my mom told them to cover, guarding me to make sure I was okay. They were real, real nice. They just said that Ryan said hi.
Could the angels have been talking about Cheryl's dead brother? Could he have played a part in Ryan's miraculous recovery?
That really shocked me because we had not discussed very much with my son about him being named after my brother Ryan.
Today, Ryan has fully recovered, and his family has little doubt of the cure. Even Dr. Foley is amazed.
I believe that medical science had exhausted all of their abilities, and I believe that it was only a miracle that Ryan got better.
I don't doubt that the angels came in. His recovery was so quick after he saw the angels, and I just believe it was a miracle.
We'll be right back after this.
Coming up on It's a Miracle, follow the tragic journey of the son of baseball legend Roberto Clemente. From the loss of his dad to the murder of his girlfriend's father, witness a miraculous reunion. And later, a 4-alarm fire that could have killed everyone inside if it weren't for a very special hero. All that and more when It's a Miracle continues.
It's a miracle.
Mysterious visions, unexplained interventions, twists of fate that positively change an outcome of a human life. Some might call these miracles. And what you're about to see is one of these amazing stories.
I was walking home from school on a cold winter day.
The song Angels Among Us, performed by the renowned group Alabama, is a moving tribute to the power of miracles. But the story behind the writing of this song is a miracle in itself. Songwriter Becky Hobbs had composed hits for stars like Conway Twitty, Emmylou Harris, and Glenn Campbell. In 1994, Cashbox magazine named her Independent Country Music Female Artist of the Year. Her biggest dream came true when Alabama took Angels Among Us to the top of the charts for over a year. But that dream began with a nightmare.
I started having premonitions that I was going to be in a bad vehicle accident. And this would happen to me shortly before I'd fall asleep. You know, when you lay down and you're getting ready to go to sleep and you're sort of drifting into a dream, I'd sit up in bed and I'd be sweating, my heart would be pounding, and I would have a feeling of despair.
Becky didn't realize that her nightmare was just the first of 2 powerful premonitions. The second would occur a few weeks later while preparing a cake for her birthday.
I was stirring the batter and something took a hold of my elbow and pulled me out through my hallway out into my front yard. It was a feeling like, you don't question this. You go out in your front yard. I knew there was something I needed to know. I didn't hear a voice at that point, and there was this force, and I followed it. And I just went, what are you trying to tell me? This loud masculine voice said, this may be your last birthday. And I'm thinking, may. The key word is may. This may be your last birthday. This is something I can prevent if I'm careful.
Becky didn't have to wait long to act on her instinct. Her premonitions came true the very next day as she and her band returned to Nashville from a benefit concert.
We were stopped at a 4-way intersection, and I looked out the window of the van. There was an 18-wheeler just barreling towards the intersection.
Her nightmare returned in a flash.
I got that same sick feeling that I had had in the premonitions. My heart started pounding. At that moment, I felt our driver's foot lift off the brake, and we started moving forward.
Becky screamed, and the driver swerved the vehicle. A second later, and everyone in the van would have been killed, but miraculously, they all walked away. In time, Becky realized her life had been spared for a reason.
It all happened so fast, but it was later that I put the pieces together. Sometime after the accident, I wrote down the title, I Believe There Are Angels Among Us, in my notebook.
There are angels among us.
I started working on it, and I had a melody happening, and I had the first line of the chorus, and I had pretty much the sketch of the chorus. Sometimes when you're writing a song, you're rocking and you feel like you're on top of the world, and you feel like, yeah, I like this. This song was more like we were in awe of what was happening. We were humbled, and I felt very small when I was writing it. I felt like it was a gift, and that I was fortunate to just be one of the channels for the gift.
Someone lights the way with just a single ray of hope. Oh,
I believe there are angels among us.
When the members of Alabama heard Becky's song, they too were deeply moved. And today, Becky Hobbs looks back at her premonitions and near-fatal accident with a miraculous sense of purpose.
I do think that one of the reasons why I'm still here is so I could write the song Angels Among Us, because the song has given so many people so much, and has given me more than I ever dreamed anything could give me. It has just been truly a blessing in my life.
To teach us how to give, to guide us with the light of love.
Coming up on It's a Miracle, follow the tragic journey of the son of baseball legend Roberto Clemente. From the loss of his dad to the murder of his girlfriend's father, witness a miraculous reunion. And later, a 4-alarm fire that could have killed everyone inside if it weren't for a very special hero. All that and more when It's a Miracle continues.
As we all know, animals, with the exception of parrots, aren't big talkers. But that doesn't mean they don't have something to say.
Lynn Norley of Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, has a very special relationship with Rupert, her African gray parrot.
There's definitely something magical about this bird. I mean, the bird just interacts with everyone in such a way that's so touching. He's just fantastic with his affection and his rapport and how he absolutely knows what's going on around him.
Lynn acquired Rupert as a baby 12 years ago. Since then, the parrot has become a central part of her life. In fact, she literally wouldn't be alive today if it weren't for Rupert. It all began in February of 1998, when Lynn put Rupert in his cage for the night and went to bed herself. What she didn't know was that in just a few hours, she would wake to a living nightmare.
I was lying there and I heard a very loud thud. Rupert fell off of his perch, and then I heard Rupert squawking very loudly, and it was definitely an alarm sound. I mean, there wasn't any doubt in my mind that there was a problem.
She went to investigate, but got no further than the bedroom door.
I was faced with a wall of smoke that was horrible smelling, and I couldn't see.
She knew that Rupert was in danger, and not thinking of the consequences, she rushed to his rescue.
When I got to the cage, I was extremely panicked, and I was sure that Rupert wouldn't make it, because parrots can take only a little bit of smoke. I couldn't find the door of the cage because I couldn't see, and I couldn't get a breath either. But somehow I fumbled and found the cage, and I grabbed Rupert out of the bottom.
Lynn rushed outside for air before returning for her dogs, who were still trapped in the fire. She took a deep breath, tucked Rupert under her arm, and ran back into the smoke-filled house. The dogs were frantic, And in the middle of all the chaos, Lynn felt Rupert go lifeless in her arms.
Oh, Rupert, no.
I was sure that Rupert had died. I felt horrible because Rupert was such a part of my life for so long, and couldn't just drop Rupert on the floor, so I wrapped Rupert in a bathrobe and gave him the only burial I could at the moment. I put him in the bottom of the shower stall.
Lynn could hear the flames crackling in the hallway outside the door. She put a wet shirt over her face, grabbed her dogs, and tried to make a run for it.
I put Alex under my arm and grabbed Panther by the collar and planned on going out the bedroom door. But when I opened the door of the bedroom, I was hit with a wall of smoke and an explosion. And I realized then that the house was bursting into flames. And I knew I had to escape by one of the windows of my second-story bedroom.
Lynn and the dogs dropped safely to the ground, leaving the house in flames. Firefighters doused the fire, but only after the inside had been totally gutted.
It was terrifying and it was horrible, and I was watching my house exploding and the smoke coming out of the roof.
The next morning, with the support of friends, Lynn returned home to see the devastation the fire had caused. The building was still standing, but there was little left of its charred interior. For Lynn, the greatest loss was Rupert.
It seemed that nothing of the house could possibly survive. The windows were all blown out. In order to fight the fire, the firefighters throw everything out the windows, so my grandmother's things and my paintings and all that, but they really didn't matter. I mean, really, truly. The only thing I feel bad about is the bird.
Lynn didn't have the heart to go into the bathroom, so her friend Lori Moore went in to remove the dead bird. After firefighters had doused the blaze, blackened debris had filled the shower. Lori pulled away the remains of crumbled walls.
I started rummaging through the tile and the plaster and the fiberglass, moved some of it away and found Rupert plastered up in the corner looking at me.
Rupert!
Very surprised. Both of us were very surprised looking at each other, and I reached down to pick him up and he bit me.
Ow! Lynn, Rupert's alive! Come in here quick!
When I heard her scream, I couldn't believe my ears. So I ran into the bathroom, and there Rupert was, sitting in the corner of the shower stall on top of the pile of debris. He was shaking and looked horrible. It was really a miracle. I mean, no one could believe the bird was alive.
Today, Lynn and Rupert are living happily together in a new home. Lynn owes her life to her pet bird. It was Rupert's warning calls that saved her from the fire. But what saved Rupert?
I don't know how the bird's alive. It's a miracle that this bird lived through that. I mean, it's totally astounding because everything that Rupert inhaled and everything that happened to Rupert, even a small part of any one thing that happened to any bird, the bird would never have had a chance to live. And everything that happened to Rupert with such intensity, it was just really a miracle.
The story you've just seen is another example of a real-life event that defies rational explanation, what some people would call a miracle. We'll return with more fascinating stories, so stay with us.
Coming up on It's a Miracle. An afternoon in the park turns into a desperate search for help.
Please call 911.
As a woman stumbles upon a mystery and a miracle. When It's a Miracle continues.
Being a mom and being pregnant, I have a schedule for everything. From exercise, to meals, to finding time to put my feet up. Routines give us comfort. The young woman in our next story didn't want to change her routine, but distractions in her day threw her off schedule. And as you're about to see, this unexpected change will result in an extraordinary rescue.
On May 16, 1998, Azita Malanian was jogging with her dogs on a mountain trail in Altadena, California. An avid runner, Azita is dedicated to her daily ritual. But earlier that day, Azita's schedule had been repeatedly interrupted, and as the day wore on, she decided not to go for her daily run.
When I finished,
I said, it's getting too late, maybe I'll just go to the gym. And so I drove by the gym, and it was just feeling so sad suddenly. And I know when I feel sad, I have to go running.
As soon as she started her run, Azita began to feel ill and decided to go home. While leaving, she found her dogs gathered around a strange patch of brush.
Let's go!
As Azita attempted to drag her dogs away, she was startled by a noise in the bushes.
I heard like a cat noise, like a meow noise. And the two pointy things poked out of the ground.
Come on, let's go! Come on, let's
And
go!
I screaming from fear, I was shaking.
Terrified, Azita ran back to the car with her dogs. But before she could leave, something drew her back to the strange spot in the woods.
As I bending down and I looking what it is, and I look at this thing, it looks like a little baby feet. I just started moving the bushes, and I dig with my nail to move the dirt.
After a few moments of digging, Azita uncovered the surprise of her life. In a panic, Azita flagged down a passing motorist who went to alert the authorities. Azita returned to the infant, desperately hoping that he would stay alive until help could arrive.
I was yelling, please God, please, please, don't let him die. And he grabbed my wrist, and he just didn't let go. It was so strong that it was just like telling me, don't let me go.
By the time park rangers got the baby to Huntington Memorial Hospital, he was suffering from hypothermia. Dr. Ricardo Lieberman is the director of the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit.
When the baby arrived to the hospital, he was critically ill. It was essentially a miracle this baby was alive at the time the baby was found by this lady and then brought by the paramedics to the hospital.
Dr. Lieberman and the hospital staff named the baby boy Christian. The baby quickly recovered and was adopted by a loving family. There is no doubt that Azita's being guided on her run that day saved the precious life of a little boy.
I truly believe it was a miracle, and if it was not of a higher force like God, neither me or anyone else would have found this child, and he would have never been alive to experience a love that he's getting from his new family.
Have you ever been at a loss to explain a wondrous event that changed your life at a critical moment? Something over which you had no control, where perhaps some other force was at work? Well, that's just what the people in this next story would call a miracle. When Elsa Amador was 12 years old, living in Puerto Rico, she met a young boy, the son of Roberto Clemente, a legendary baseball player who had been tragically killed in a plane crash. Elsa and Roberto Jr. instantly felt a strong attraction to each other.
We told each other we loved each other every day. Yeah. I mean, every day, like 25 times a day.
In spite of their tender age, Roberto and Elsa believed they would spend their lives together, but a tragic event tore them apart. Elsa's father was the innocent victim of a botched robbery attempt, and now his family was in extreme danger.
Elsa, come on, get out.
Elsa's mother had identified the man who killed her husband and was receiving death threats. The FBI moved in to take control of the situation. Elsa had only enough time to call Roberto before she and her family were rushed out of the country into the Witness Protection Program.
I explained to him that we had to leave, and unfortunately I couldn't tell him where I was going. I just kept telling him how much I cared for him and not to blame me for what I was going to do, that it was out of my control.
Elsa spent the next few years moving around the United States, but she never forgot her childhood sweetheart.
I thought about him all the time, and I sometimes closed my eyes and I would see an image of him. He was really thin and tall and just smiling all the time. As time went on, you sort of assume that, they have his own life now. I just imagined him, settled, married.
In November of 1996, Elsa's mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer. She had always felt responsible for separating her daughter from her childhood sweetheart. And on her deathbed, she made a startling request, urging her to find her lost love.
Find Roberto. He's the man for you.
And I'm like, how am I going to find him? And she's like, you should find him. And so I kind of brushed it off.
And then, a few months after her mother's death, Elsa had a sudden, unexplainable urge to attend a Yankees baseball game.
It was something that was just pushing me. It was like this pushing thing.
Whatever was pushing Elsa to the stadium got her there an hour early that day, in time for a pregame event. The Yankees were celebrating Hispanic Heritage Day, and there, center field, accepting an award for his father, was Elsa's long-lost love, Roberto Clemente Jr.
It was really strange. What is he doing there? I'm like, you know, you figured you don't see him for all these years, and then all of a sudden you see him at the park.
Elsa spent the next 9 innings of the game desperately trying to locate Roberto, but without success. The boy she had never forgotten, the man her mother begged her to find, was closer than he'd ever been in over 15 years, and still he was out of reach. Finally, a security guard gave her a possible lead, the number of a local sports cafe. Elsa called and left a message, and the next day, Roberto returned the call and arranged to meet again the woman he had been separated from years ago.
I felt like I had just seen her yesterday, just been with her in school the day before. The feelings that I had for Elsa were so strong, and my friends, everybody knew about Elsa. So it was something that, you know, I always kept her alive in my heart.
On Valentine's Day, 1998, Roberto and Elsa made their reunion complete when they married in New York City. Today, they still marvel over how powers far beyond their own made the dying wish of Elsa's mother come true.
I truly believe that our parents had a little meeting in heaven. I said, wait a second, let's do something here. I believe that it was meant to be, and I truly believe it was a time where our parents' souls just got together and said, look, let's just make just 2 poor children happy.
For Roberto and Elsa, a tragic separation has ended happily with a miraculous second chance.
Join us again next week when we'll bring you more fascinating stories that defy belief.
See you next time on It's a Miracle.